Hi, so let's talk about why it is important to think about your equity that you own in a company in terms of number of shares or the unit of shares and not actually the percentage of the ownership. Now, here is why it's important to always think about your shares or your equity in terms of units or number as against percentage of ownership. Here's what I mean. Let's say that you are a co-founder in a startup and you have 40% equity, right? 40% equity at the time of incorporating that business, especially if it is a 1 million share capital company, actually means that you own 400,000 units of shares, right? Now, when dilution sets in, you're still going to have your 400,000 units, but you will no longer have 40%. How? With more issuance of shares available to the company, there is a further reduction in the percentage of your ownership. So it means that if you were once a 1 million share capital company and now the company's shares was now increased to 2 million shares, and all you have is 400,000 units, you still have your 400,000 units. But considering the new issue of shares, which has now made it to move from 1 million to 2 million, you no longer have 40% equity. What you now have is 20% equity, because you're benchmarking the total number of units of shares that you have against the total number of shares in the company. I hope it makes sense. Now, that's when there is a new issue of shares. It means that the company decided to raise additional funds or to raise more funds by issuing new shares. And this happens especially when all the shares have been taken up. Again, dilution can occur. That's one way that dilution can occur. Another way is even if there is no fresh issue of shares, but there is new investors come on board, and the agreement that you and your co-founders already had is, when we get a new investor, we're going to reduce the number of units of shares that you have and then give to the new investor. That already means that when a new investor wants to come on board, you'll have to relinquish some of your shares. Again, the percentage that you previously had will no longer be what you have. In this second instance now, in fact, the total number of units of shares available to you will be reduced. The total number of units of shares available to you will no longer be 400,000. Now, let's say that the company wants to issue 10% equity to a new investor. You have 40%, your partner has 60%. Now, for you to get 10% equity, it means that you and your partner has to relinquish 60 to 40% extra. Your partner or your co-founder who has 60% has to release 60% of the 10% that is needed. That's 6 units of shares, right? Or 6% rather. And then you have to release 40% of the 10% that is needed, which is 4%. So 4% plus 6% gives you 10%. So obviously, because you have released 4% from your shares, from your once 40%, you no longer have 40%, you now have 36%. That means you now have 360,000 units of shares, because you actually removed 40,000 units and you give to an investor, and your partner removed 60,000 units from his own and gave to an investor. So your partner has 540,000 units now, while you have 360,000 units now. And 40,000 plus 60,000 makes 100,000 units, right? And that is 10% of the company now given to this new investor. And that's why I said, when you are being issued equity in the company, always think about it in terms of the number of shares and not necessarily in terms of the equity. Equity is a percentage of the ownership. It is what the totality of the shares amounts to in terms of percentage. So that equity will always reduce once there are additional issue of shares or once new investors come on board. In a situation where there are additional issue of shares, like you increase your share capital from 1 million to 2 million, that means that you created 1 million additional units of shares. What will happen is what you have currently will no longer be what you will have in line of the increase. So if you had 10% equity before and there is an increase of the share capital, you will always still have your 100,000 units, but it will no longer amount to 10%. That would have changed. So think about this and think about the fact that there will always be dilution when issuing shares and when, accepting equity in a company. Thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them under the comment section of this video and I'll be glad to answer.